Barbara Chris Beach grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, and attended Oberlin College, where she met the man she likes to call her current husband, George Kimmich Beach, known as Kim. They were married a month after her graduation and moved to Cambridge, Massachusetts, where she became a student at Harvard Graduate School of Education, while Kim attended Harvard Divinity School. Barbara taught English at high schools in Lexington, Massachusetts, and Buffalo, New York, where Kim served the first of his several Unitarian Universalist ministries. Barbara's lifelong passion was dance, studying with Martha Graham and several of her lead dancers, and herself teaching children and adults in various settings through the years. She choreographed and performed with liturgical dance groups that she led in each of Kim's churches in Marblehead, Austin, Cleveland, and Arlington, as well as for UU assemblies in New York and Holland. Education and dance figured in her next career as an editor of Education, Creation, and Dance, then Educational Leadership, and for several years an executive for Management Concepts Incorporated at Tyson's Corner, Virginia. Barbara's other self-described name tag is Wife-Long Unitarian. She has been a leader in the International Association for Religious Freedom, the UU Partner Church Council, and the International Convocation of Unitarians and Universalists, the latter two in close association with Emery and Rita Laser. Today, she is speaking about yet another group, the International Convocation of Unitarian Universalist Women, of which she was the founding president. She also wants you to know that, quote, zooming in a wheelchair and wobbling behind a walker, unquote, are not the side effects of too much dancing. Barbara.
Thank you so much, Marilyn. I have a disclaimer, and that is that I find when I think about Sigmund Freud's questions and Unitarian Universalist answers that my eyes tear. So if you see me blowing my nose and wiping my eyes, I apologize in advance. To begin, when Sigmund Freud asked, "What does woman want?" you can almost hear the plaintive cry in his voice. He said he'd spent over 30 years researching the feminine soul and still had no answer. In 1925, almost 100 years ago, he concluded, and I quote, "Women oppose change, receive passively, and add nothing of their own." I'm sure you all agree with that. Getting a UU answer to Freud's question began in Houston, Texas, with a conference sponsored by the Southwest Women in Religion. UUs concerned about Unitarianism's neglect of women's issues held a conference there, and I worked with the subcommittee to plan topics. Then the group asked if I could kind of hold things together at the conference. So I thought I would stand backstage. This is my dancer background, with a clipboard in my hand and usher one speaker off and push the next one on to speak. In this hotel, there was no backstage, only a bare platform. Frankly, I was shocked. From the platform, when I got on it, I looked around the ballroom into the faces of almost 500 women. Later, I learned we were from 18 different countries and 37 states. We were together in Houston, Texas in February 2008. Clearly, this event had come at the right time. The first keynote speaker was Margot Adler, whom some of you remember as the lead journalist from National Public Radio. Another was Rebecca Parker, then president of Star King School of the Ministry. Another speaker was Frances Moore Lappé, the author of Diet for a Small Planet. Lappé rose to speak, looked around the room, and she said, I guess I am in a subset of you women. I wear lipstick. Carolyn McDade led the choir and group singing. And as she sat down to the piano, she said, when I sat down to write this piece, I did not know what it would be. And a few minutes later, we all sang Spirit of Life. There was incredible emotional energy in that room. Even the chandeliers quivered. You can see why Spirit of Life has become a UU anthem sung around the world in many languages. Through all this, I found that I was on stage for 3 days. That's what happens when there's no backstage. Ushering people on and off, introducing speakers, thanking them. We knew there was more work to do, and as we completed our conference, we all got a standing ovation. A year later, we did hold a second conference. As a UU, I always say, when in doubt, break into groups. We did. I remember the small group reports that came back to the whole conference. They said our mission is to work to help women achieve their full human rights, including access to jobs, to education, to health care, and their 50% of volunteer church and community leadership roles. With these goals, we were in line with United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, who developed the Millennial Development Goals, which included, I'll give you only two, universal primary education for boys and girls with equal access to all levels of education for young women and men, and another, promote gender equality and empower women economically. He added, promote women economically, because he said economic empowerment of women is the means to all other ends. Moon was a pragmatist. He reviewed the UN budget and he found something fairly surprising. He found out that the budget expense for coffee was higher than all the budget allocated for women's programs. He created a new organization, UN Women. With Hillary Clinton's help, he persuaded Michelle Bachelet to accept the post of Deputy Secretary General to the UN Women Program. Her 4-year term as president of Chile had just ended with an 84% approval rating. Before she became president, many things happened to her, including her imprisonment in Villa Grimaldi in Chile, where she and her mother were taken. Finally, she was deported to Australia, and her family brought her back to Chile, and she finished medical school, was appointed Secretary of Health, and later was elected president of that country. So a year later, to go back to my story, we held our second conference, and I will apologize to Emery. I'm going to say it was in Morris Wascherhey. And Emery, please correct me anytime, in Transylvania. I was seated at the head table with other speakers, and attendees were seated at school desk chairs the length of the room. A few minutes before I was to speak, the conference organizer crept in front of the table. Shh, she said. Barbara, we're running late. Can you limit your remarks to 10 minutes? In front of me, a small sheaf of neatly typed pages, my remarks. I turned them over. A minute or two later, I rose to speak. I said, my husband Kim and I were talking last evening, and he expressed his admiration for the warmth and tenacity of women here and their ties with their extended families, with their communities, and with their churches. And then he said, quoting from James Luther Adams, his professor and mentor at Divinity School, God is the community forming power. I looked at the women in the audience, and many beautifully attired in their local traditional dress. I saw of waves tip down and bodies bend as the women reach down to pull a pencil out of their bag, and then again to get a notebook to write in. Then they wrote the Adams quotation in that book. For me, it was a transformational moment. I felt in those words that the women saw themselves, steadfast women of their churches and families, empowered by these groups that they were a part of, valued by their lives and their work. They are part of the community forming power, which empowers them with spirit and with grace. At this conference, Laura Nagel, who was principal puller together of strings, introduced Zsofia Strasnitzky, who has served ever since as ICUUW executive director. She grew up in Transylvania speaking Polish, Hungarian, and Romanian, and then she picked up English and 4 other languages, a perfect director for an international women's organization. My personal story continues with an experience forever embedded in my brain. I met Kathy Cordes, then executive director of the UU Partner Church Council, in the coffee shop of the GA exhibit hall. She said, I've just met an amazing man. Why amazing? I asked. She told me about learning of the work of Richard Ford, a professor, and his development of community capacity building. Ford and his colleagues, she continued, have developed a fresh way of understanding how people in community change their lives, become effective. So she described Ford's approach to learning about a community, and he said, first you draw a map of what it looks like. You show your small town or village with locations of significant people and offices. Where do people live who seem to affect for everyone certain changes and decisions? What kinds of power do these changes represent? As Kathy explained more about the community, mapping and understanding, she added what she saw as the benefits of this approach. It protects making assumptions about people that could prove meaningless or, at worst, insulting. And as Americans, we are very good at that. We think we know more than we do. So we began to discuss what happens when people in the community begin to cite what they and others in that community would like to see changed. Often there are many ideas and some disagreements. Then Kathy said, you start writing things down. Everything? They or we can't do everything. How do you decide what to eliminate? And right out of the top of her head, she said, you don't vote. You don't vote? Why not? That's democracy at work. Kathy said, voting always produces winners and losers. It's better to decide by consensus. So Kathy tossed out pairwise ranking and other tools that we might use. But after a couple of months, she, with a little help, came up with the Global Sisters process, which I refer to as capacity building light. Participants compile ideas, they mix and meld them, guided by the group mission, and everybody finds things in common and they work together. They're halfway there by the time they start. Everybody knows what they're trying to do and everybody wins. Because communities are elastic and diverse, because they change, and as they sustain their community integrity, they do so by incorporating consensus building as a positive element in their working identity. In short, this conversation was another transformative experience for me. So I say here, thank you, Kathy, and thank you, Dr. Ford. Another thing I've learned is that women can lead and empower others in ways that many have never imagined. For example, Gisela Gnadge did not want to come to that meeting in Houston. Her family insisted, she said. But on the way home, she told her seatmate on the airplane, "We will do this too." When she got home, she and some Transylvanian women decided they needed a leadership school to learn skills and to build confidence in women. We US women helped find a trainer who could develop a training program and school with her. She did. Many people came. Years later, when the Ukrainian war broke out, a group of women not only accompanied the Providence Foundation, which is the service foundation of the Hungarian Unitarian Church, with a shipment to Ukraine, but they opened their homes to Ukrainian refugees, creating dormitory rooms with lines of cots in storage areas. Today, they are helping provide counseling to families suffering anxiety caused by bombing and terror in the war with Russia next door. And I have just a little bit of, well, maybe I don't. Yes, I do. Of Yeezy's diary that I'd love to share with you. And I'll send the whole thing with you if you send me an email. On 13 April 2023, I joined the Ukrainian aid shipment program of the Providence Organization of the Hungarian Unitarian Church for the second time. This was Providence's 8th aid mission since the outbreak of the war. The organization has been delivering humanitarian aid to Transcarpathia, southwest Ukraine, and to the war zone, Odessa and Mykolaiv. This time, we went to Berehov, the coordination center for the Transcarpathian Reformed Church, not Unitarian. The shipment included 18 kilowatt, an 18 kilowatt generator, a pallet of canned food and cooking oil, 30 tourniquets, and 400 wax candles. Now, as before, our hearts were filled with the sadness of compassion, yet there is always a little ray of joy at the sight of people with good intentions who try to send hope into despair. There are several refugee shelters in Berhov. Ukrainians fleeing from war-torn regions are received with open hearts by this shelter run by the Reformed Church. And then she mentioned she spoke to a woman of a 4-generation refugee family from Bakhmut. The eldest is retired, the youngest is still in kindergarten. They had already fled once in 2014, but returned soon afterwards, hoping that the Russian-Ukrainian conflict would end peacefully. They all had jobs, tidy homes, and safe lives. Bakhmut was the cradle of the best years of their lives. They did not want to flee. But one day, a grenade hit next to her little grandson, who was playing peacefully in the yard. It did not explode, thankfully. But this incident made her and her family call the head of the church center where they had found shelter in 2014 to ask if they could be admitted and if they could provide jobs for her family. Heartened by a yes, they left, and by the time they had arrived, there was already a job for one family member, and the other members of the family since have found jobs. The woman said, even though they started out with bleeding hearts, Gizi writes, they found love there, and that is what keeps them going. A lot has happened in Bakhmut since they left. On her phone, she showed the photos and emailed them to us that she received from the Bakhmut police, showing photographs of their homes after they were ransacked and looted. Their apartment building was hit by a bomb. Struggling with tears, the grandmother said, "We have nothing left. We don't even have hope anymore. Whether we will get compensation or whether our apartment building will ever be rebuilt is a big question mark. We don't have enough money to buy a house on a teacher's salary. We have nothing left." There's a little bit more, again, from Gizi's diary, which I would be very happy to send to anybody who would like to read it. I can't believe all the things that the Transylvanian women have accomplished. And Gizi ended her diary by saying, day after day, from the comfort of our sofas, we are witnessing a senseless war's horrors and atrocities. Readers, friends, and supporters in compassion, thank you on behalf of myself and my fellow human beings who are suffering, for making possible through your financial donations, for making it possible for us to alleviate suffering of many people in need in Ukraine. Years later, years earlier, I was talking with the gentleman who was then bishop in Transylvania, and he remarked to us at an early meeting, quote, "If you want to have a long conversation, ask a man about politics and the economy. If you want to get something accomplished, get the women together." I believe we have an answer to the question, what do women want? And it is our Unitarian Universalist answer. And it is the answer of the women who work with Gizi Naj, who is a board member of the International Convocation of Unitarian Universalist Women. Women want freedom to seek their own dignity and well-being, freedom from parochialism, from limiting expectations, but more than freedom from external restraints, women want an inward spiritual freedom. They want to transform and they want to be transformed. Is this not the essence of our liberating faith? My answer is yes, this is the essence of our liberating faith. We are drawn to communities where our work and faith can transform us. We are drawn to work with women and men who believe that inward spiritual freedom belongs to every person. I am here to celebrate that answer, to continue to live it, and to thank each of you for helping to make it part of our own lives and our own lives together in this bridge community. Thank you. I want to end with a benediction, which is a favorite of Kim's and mine. Thou, the life of all our lives, let us be joined each unto each as one community. May we know now the calling of our time and the grace offered us this day. Amen.